environmental impact statement from last year, so I want to read that to you for those of you that... Yeah, so we'll get on it. So we got lots of time. 182 pages? It is rather long. So thanks. So yeah, my name's Mike. I've met a lot of you, but maybe not all of you. I've been in Death Valley in this role for about 5 years as the superintendent, but I actually came here 19 years ago as the IT guy, and I used to work with Lee and come out and fix his computer out here a couple times a year, work on it. So that's the first time I really came to Saline Valley, was 19 years ago. But I've been at Death Valley for off and on for 19 years, and it's extremely mind-blowing and humbling to get to work at Death Valley. There's so many cool places. We'll talk a little bit about some of them, but you certainly are here. You know about the Warm Springs, but I love Death Valley. I spend every weekend hiking and camping. I plan to be here until I'm dead, hiking every weekend. I've just cleared about 6,000 miles hiking in Death Valley. Wow. If I didn't have to go to work, I would have more. But, and it's another feature here, and I know some of these folks are new, and we did want to get everybody out to see. They were all very excited to come and see Saline Valley, but the team that we get to work with in the National Park Service at Death Valley, trust me, if you've been to other parks, we have literally the best park team, because people come to Death Valley because they're passionate about it, they want to be here, and it's a great place to be. So I'm really honored to get to work with these folks that are here today. So, what are we here for? Why another public meeting, other than that I'm sure everybody loves public meetings. So you are maybe familiar with the plan, but quick history of, let me think about how to approach this without spending a ton of time. So going back to 1994 was the California Desert Protection Act. So that's 25 years ago. We just on October 31st had the 25th anniversary of the California Desert Protection Act. So it's the birthday for Death Valley National Park. What happened in 1994 was 1.3 million acres of BLM land was transferred to national park land. And how lands become national park lands has to do with two things. They have to be so special that they're nationally significant. So there's a whole process that I don't know very well that people come out and say, is this nationally significant or not? And for Death Valley National Park, which is the largest park outside the state of Alaska, there are so many things within Death Valley that our government, our Congress, and people going back to the, before us, have determined that this place is really special and should be protected as a national park. So what becomes, getting a little bit off script because I don't want to get too confusing, but what becomes a little bit tricky about that, of course, is it may be a really special place, but then they don't tell you exactly how to carry that out step by step, right? So you need to come up with a plan that sort of fits how national parks are managed within that framework. So if you take the purpose of the National Park Service. How many people have been to other national parks besides Death Valley? Most are right. That's good. Be worried if you hadn't. So every park is managed exactly the same, and the National Park Service has a really special mission. I'm going to make this a quiz. You guys can what are the two? The Park Service, generally speaking, does two things. Can you name what either of those are?
Preserve existing conditions.
Preserve existing conditions. That's pretty much it. Yeah. So you're preserving the natural and cultural resources, blah blah blah. But basically, you take whatever it was that made that place, whether it's cultural history or natural history, special, and you preserve it for future generations, which means in perpetuity or forever. So you take something that's special and you try to maintain it that way. What's the other half of the mission?
Provide for enjoyment.
Enjoyment. Who said that? Nice job. There'll be so the enjoyment. So enjoyment is interpreted to be sort of maintaining infrastructure. So there's bathrooms, there's roads, there's visitor centers, there's information, there's campgrounds, there's things that help people enjoy a resource. If you go, you understand what that means. So that includes education and interpretation, as well as law enforcement and all the things that go in. So you have enjoyment, you have preservation. All 419 National Park Service sites are managed exactly the same. So, except for this one, it's not enjoyable. There are but there are unique things that are here. Yeah, that is a thank you. Good segment. I'll use that.
Thanks, Mike.
Worry for that lead.
Questions at the end.
So some of the things that are unique to Death Valley, you have big natural, superlative things that you're familiar with. Hottest place on Earth by virtue of the 134-degree temperature recorded in 1913. It was 4 degrees cooler here. Lee says it was only about 130 that day. So that was
better.
it was also the lowest elevation in North America, 282 feet below sea level, and the driest place in North America, 1.9 inches of rain. So all those superlatives, those are fine. But when you start thinking about Death Valley as a park and the big special place that it is, you have 20 different mountain ranges going all the way up to 11,000 feet right there. You have wildlife, plants spanning that whole amount. People think flat, barren desert. Well, guess what? There's water. You can see water here, but there's water throughout this desert. It's a pretty wet place. So it's an amazing place just to wander around and see the special places like that. But then there's unique stuff. Has anybody been to the racetrack?
Yeah.
Yep.
So a lot of you. So just over that hill right there, the racetrack has these mysterious moving rocks that slide around during weird conditions. There's Eureka Dunes just over that hill. You guys have mostly been over there, maybe over the past. So that's highest dunes in California. And there's 2 species of plants that live nowhere on Earth except on those dunes. It's such a special environment. And those were all those plants, by the way, it was a side note, but they were almost destroyed. By the 70s, they were almost gone. They stopped doing OHV riding on the dunes in the 70s when the BLM was managing it. The Park Service inherited it in '94 and has continued that, and both species have continued to thrive. And last year they were delisted, so.
Go Earth!
Yay, go Earth! Scotty's Castle. Has anybody been to Scotty's Castle? So a bunch of
Recently.
You can. There are destruction tours you can go see now. So Scotty's Castle is a really cool. It was sort of tied in with mining and Death Valley Scotty and con men and neat stuff from the past. Of course, then 2015 a big flood came through. It did about $53 million worth of damage, and that's one of the projects we're working on to try to get that restored. It should be open by 2021. Patrick might talk a little more about that later.
Open the swimming pool.
It was full of water for the first time during the flood. Yeah. I got to see it. It was not very pleasant water. Military plane testing. We just saw them half an hour ago. So this is the only park that actually has legitimized, legal, low-level national defense testing in it. And it may seem like it's a little bit of a conflict with use. Some people are troubled by it, but what I can say is if that testing weren't allowed, this would not have been added to the park and protected as it is. In 1994, that was one of the deals. Testing continues as it was before, or there's no park. And so that's a feature that people come, they flock from Europe to go see and take photographs of the people flying. Of course, we'll talk about the one that crashed and died a while back. The military plane testing, the Shoshone tribe, so this is also the only national park that has an Indian tribe entirely, essentially a reservation or a village contained within its boundaries. And so we have a unique relationship with the Timbisha, whose traditional homeland is here in Death Valley, and they've been for forever. So some unique things that are here. You don't get to experience these in other places. And our job, like I said, is to ensure that these places are here in the future for everyone to enjoy. So, including, of course, Saline Valley, which is also part of Death Valley. And I know we're here to talk about Saline Valley, but I wanted to talk, besides I love Death Valley and I want to talk about it all the time, to talk about Saline Valley in that context. So if you know another national park and everybody's always sort of like, this part of Death Valley is completely unique. Like you don't find a community that's this special in these types of uses in most national parks. So when we talk about putting together a plan and coming together with what we're going to do, it actually was pretty tricky because you guys that use this site, and I talked to people that have been coming here for many, many decades this morning, I know some of you guys have been coming here a long time. How do you continue this type of sort of non-traditional use in a national park? Of course, that's what everybody's been nervous and afraid of. Oh my gosh, they're going to like rip out the tubs, and then we're going to have to go, soak in the dust and sand and the water. And, so obviously, that's not what's going to happen. But I know there's been a lot of trepidation about that for years, and the Park Service was tasked with writing a plan. And frankly, looking back at the last 25 years since this was added, we've written 2 major plans, but in both cases they said, we're not touching Saline Valley, that's too complicated. So they did a backcountry plan in 2012, we did a general management plan in 2002, and both of them said, this applies to everywhere but Saline Valley, we'll deal with that later. So here, 25 years later, we now have completed a plan which talks about the future, and here's the quick history. This is going to be important. So to get to where we are, the Saline Valley plan only covers 1,100 acres right here. It doesn't talk about roads that are far away from here. A lot of questions we'll get about this and that. It's only talking about right here. We had public meetings in 2012, 2014, and 2018. We had over 1,300 comments just in the 2018 ones. There were many more going back. And I can tell you that, at least since in the 5 years I've been here, I've read every single comment, many of us have. And there's been a lot of thought and change into the plan over time based on your input. Not everybody's on the same page, so it's not like, oh, everybody wrote the same thing, we'll just do that. Because there are lots of, as with anything, there's conflicting interests. So we're trying to balance that with law and policy that you have to follow, which was what sort of made some of the things challenging. But what we heard, if I had to identify the 4 values that were overwhelmingly, resoundingly clear in each round of public meetings. Number 1 is that the community of people that is here is very important to everybody. When they talk about first is the emotions, the connection they feel with the place, but if the place were them by themselves, it's more with the people, the community, the communication, the feeling that you get from community, which is sort of how do you capture that as a thing, but that's definitely something that resonated was community. That the soaking tubs are an important part of coming here. So the soaking tubs themselves, the clothing optional nature of being here, which sort of contributes to the freedom feeling, blah, 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 but the clothing optional was number 3. And then the traditional tribal use, so the Timbisha Shoshone tribe and the value that they place on this was something that resonated repeatedly through themes of people that says that this is very important, this area is very important and sacred to the tribe. So those 4 things were the things we heard most frequently, and I'm going to tell you how we addressed each of those, and then I'm going to shut up, I promise. So the plan, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking to you about why it takes 12 years to write a plan. One of the reasons was we wanted to make sure we heard from everybody, we got it right, or as close as we could to getting it right. But also trying to be thoughtful in how it comes out. So when you talk about community, the plan option that we picked was a community engagement option. And that's recognizing that this is a remote, isolated site, that as much as I know you want rangers here every day of the week, right? We do our best to get out here. We love this place too, but it's also very difficult. We're covering 3.4 million acres, which is it's the size of Connecticut. So we're not going to be here. We have our host, Wizard Lee, here year-round, which is awesome that we have a Park Service host here. And so recognizing that we have a presence, but it's not, we're not able to be here all the time. And that you guys, as a community, not necessarily you individually, are here all the time. That working with the community that comes here is going to be the best way to engage with managing the place. And frankly, the place doesn't need a ton of management. There are a few things that have happened that have resulted that visitation is through the roof park-wide. We've gained